Chair, and thank you all for attending today. My questions are about the United Nations, so I don't know who will answer those questions. In total, how much does Australia pay to the United Nations or its subsidiaries each year, in dollar terms?
Do we need to take that on notice?
No, I don't think we do. I think someone's coming down from upstairs. We will unfortunately get into questions of definition about which subsidiary agencies and all the rest of it. We may need to, in order to give a completely comprehensive answer, we may need to take it on notice, but there'll be a number of things that we can say at a general level that I hope will be what you're after, Senator.
I'm after a comprehensive level. Yeah.
Well, if you need comprehensive, Senator, I'll ask the officials to do their best at the table.
Yes.
And then if parts of it need to be taken on notice, we'll return to the committee.
Of course.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Apologies, I just had to come down the stairs. Justin Lee, First Assistant Secretary, Multilateral Policy Division. Senator, can I just ask you to repeat the question? Thanks.
Yes. In total, how much does Australia pay to the United Nations or its subsidiaries each year, in dollar terms?
Thank you, Senator. The key contribution that Australia makes is our assessed contribution to the United Nations, and that's based upon the size of Australia's economy. Australia contributes 2.21% to the UN regular budget.
The question was in dollar terms.
Yes, and that equates to, in 2021, around $82.2 million is our assessed contribution to the UN. We also make other contributions, for example, to UN peacekeeping, and that is also based on an assessed contribution to the United Nations. And in 2019-20, which was the last year we had a figure for that, Australia provided $212 million in assessed contributions to support UN peacekeeping missions. Senator, that is not the total, of course, though, of our contribution to the United Nations, and I don't have a figure because that is provided by a range of contributions that may be made through the Development Cooperation Program. It may be made through contributions to UN specialised agencies. They would be looked after by other Australian government agencies as well. So getting the total contribution that Australia makes to the UN and all of its subsidiary agencies requires a collation of data from across government, which we don't have.
I'm happy to take that on notice.
Thanks.
Thank you. This is a very important issue for our constituents because they're concerned at the cost and the impact on the country. The next one is along the same vein. In total, how much does it cost Australia to comply with or to implement UN dictates in the various forms, treaties, agreements, declarations, protocols that are expected of the UN members?
Thank you, Senator. I don't think that we would be able to provide a figure on that because if Australia, of course, seeks to adhere to its international obligations, including treaty reporting processes, a lot of that would be the responsibility of Australian government agencies, and to calculate that, you would need to look at the staff costs, the time costs. So I don't think that we would have that figure available, or be able to collect a figure on implementation of international obligations in the way that you portray it.
Okay, it would be. Thank you for your openness. It would be enormous. I'm thinking of the compliance with the UN Kyoto Protocol. That's cost a lot of farmers to lose their property rights. That's been estimated by some people to be either $100 or $200 billion. So it's rubbery, but it's a difficult thing. Compliance with the Water Act, which puts compliance with international obligations as it's one of its primary aims right through. Compliance with the UN Paris Agreement, particularly when other nations don't have to wreck their economy to comply because their goals are so easy. So manufacturing, the UN Lima Agreement Declaration from 1975, and the governance impacts from the UN Rio Declaration in 1992. So I'll just take it. But I am wondering if anyone has figured out the cost to this country in dollar terms, the cost to our economy, the cost to a loss of our governance and sovereignty.
Senator, I think the only other way to portray it, though, is the benefits that Australia gets from these arrangements and these agreements.
With respect, I understand that, but this isn't a forum for arguing. Somebody's seeking costs, and if somebody else wants to ask a question about the benefits, then that's up to them, but time is very limited, I'm sorry.
So that leads to my third question, which is, given the globalist approach of the UN, what value is there for Australia to constantly pay out money directly and at huge indirect cost to our governance and our economy?
Well, I think the answer to that would be the benefits that we get from those arrangements, both in terms of having rules that guide many things that guide the Australian economy. If we look, for example, a lot of the work that we have been doing around rules that guide international aviation, international shipping, telecommunications, all of those rules are set by the United Nations. It means that we've got a global economy that we can participate in, that sets equal rules between countries, which Australia as an open trading economy, an economy of our size can benefit from. Similarly, we have international organisations dealing with global challenges, so the roles that the WHO is playing in response to COVID, dealing with those challenges that we want addressed in the world. By making contributions to those, we get benefit from that. So we appreciate that there are costs, both direct costs and obligations that Australia has to adhere, but we also get a number of very significant benefits.
And I'd put it to you that the benefits, for example, in aviation, they could be done by a country hosting the other countries of the world to come up with a convention on that. So it doesn't have to come from the UN, and we've shown that in the history of our planet. What would it mean to Australia if Australia chose to withdraw from the United Nations, if we exited?
Senator, I can assure you that there is no consideration of that, our engagement in the international system and indeed Australia's security and prosperity has been underpinned for a very long time by what is known as the rules-based international order and the institutions that were created to support that. What we have seen in the last 12 months, frankly, the impact of COVID around the world, we've seen what happens when those systems can click into gear and can support the countries and the communities that need them. The international cooperation that we have through those UN agencies and organisations is very important to that management. COVID-19, as I was saying, has really exposed the magnitude of the consequences if those global institutions are not working as well as they should. That does not mean, and I think the Prime Minister and you have probably engaged on this before, it does not mean, as the Prime Minister said in his Lowy speech last year, he said we can't be an indifferent bystander to these events that impact our livelihoods, our safety and our sovereignty. We must, as we have done previously, cultivate, marshal and bring our influence to bear to protect and promote our national interests. So what we seek is an international system that respects the unique characteristics of individual states within it, in our case, Australia. That still provides a framework for cooperation on security and prosperity. Dr. Lee has advanced international aviation, I think, if I was hearing correctly, as an example of that. But there are countless others, Senator, where we understand that working cooperatively with others is an important part of our national interest. It's in our national interest. It allows us to pursue shared regional and global objectives, and it is a centrepiece of our international engagement. Now, we did a lot of work on this last year, a lot of work. and that has crystallised and firmed the government's views on these matters.
Well, thank you, and I respect your right to have an opinion. I also have a different opinion.
As I do yours, Senator.
Thank you. I know you've shown that in the past.
We're in a very good democracy here, Senator.
Yeah.
And the 5 minutes are ticking away.
Sorry,
Okay.
I took some of those minutes. My apologies.
I do acknowledge the Prime Minister said, I think, these words on the 3rd of October 2019 when he addressed the Lowy Institute in Sydney. Unaccountable, he spoke of the unaccountable internationalist bureaucrats, or bureaucracies, I think they were the words, and then promptly advocated to give World Health Organisation more power. I would argue with you about the World Health Organisation's benefits because I think it contributed to the rampant spread of COVID. But nonetheless, how many funding arrangements between Australia and the UN are open-ended?
I'm not...
They get ratcheted up automatically, or they haven't got a closing date.
Yes, I'll try and take that on notice, Senator, but my initial reaction would be that we would have no open-ended commitments, or any commitment that we make would be on the basis of an agreement or an understanding, but I can take that on notice, Senator.
I think there are some updates to our laws or our requirements or our commitments that are made automatically if a UN document or protocol is changed. Are you aware of any of those?
You could be, I'm not sure, Senator, you could be referring to what I mentioned earlier, which was our assessed contribution, and there is a committee that looks at our assessed contributions and adjusts that contribution according to changes in our national circumstances, our size of our economy, debt ratios and the like in comparison to other countries. That is still part of a committee which we participate in, but ultimately we would abide by the finding of that committee at the end of that process. So there is that sort of process, and that's what I was referring to earlier about the calculation of our assessed contributions.
It may be, I'll finish up now, but it may be in the human rights area or the rights of the child area where changes in the UN requirements are automatically fed through to us and we have to comply with them. So that may be something to consider, but I believe that's the case.
I can take that on notice.
Thank you, if you could. And, you know, from my questioning, I really question the need to stay in the UN and the benefits of this country because of the governance impact on our country, the sovereignty impacts on our country and the economic impacts on our country. So, you know, I recognise and acknowledge that this country's current government is not thinking about exiting the UN, but we certainly are. So, and a lot of our constituents want it.
Thank you
I understand
for
that,
that
Senator,
comment.
can I also say, understand the reform issues you've raised, and we are strong supporters of the reform processes that have been underway in the UN, and I acknowledge more to do. And I did raise that with the Secretary-General last week in a conversation on a number of regional issues, but also in passing on the UN reform questions.
Thank you very much, Chair.